Hello, hello, hello. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Activate God podcast. I am your host, Habibat Shatu, and I'm super, super, super excited to be here with you all. So we're talking about episode 3 right now, episode 3 of Activate God podcast, and today we'll be talking about how to hear God's voice. Like, yeah, how do you hear God's voice? How do you know if it's you versus God? Like, what should you be looking out for? Yeah, we're gonna be talking about that today. But before we start, right, the first thing I usually do, or at some point during the podcast, is pray. So I'm gonna start off with a prayer that's connected towards how to hear God's voice. So you may assume a posture of reverence. Creator, thank you for another day. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you for allowing us to experience your blessings. Thank you for the ways in which you continue to protect us. Thank you for the ways in which you continue to speak to us and work on behalf of us. We ask that this message specifically is aligned with what it is that you desire for us. We ask that we continue to hear your voice clearly. We ask that the message that you are giving to us is as clear as possible, this way that we can understand and move in your will. My biggest prayer for all of us is that we literally exist in your glory at all times, right? So please allow us to hear you. Please communicate with us in a way that we can understand. And particularly for this prayer and this message, I ask that you speak to me and speak through me so that I can deliver your word and whatever it is that you desire. I ask for all these things and more. Amen, amen, and ashe. Welcome once again. Yeah, let's get right into it. So first off, right? The first two episodes we've been talking about fears, and I decided to transition just a little bit to talk a little bit more about like how do you actually hear God's voice. But the reason why I started out with how to navigate through your fears, which was episode 1, and the second episode was 5 ways to reduce your fears, is because I think in order for you to hear God's voice, you have to be less fearful. Like, you literally have to be less fearful. You have to, like, be able to navigate through your fears because God speaks to us in different ways, and the less fearful we are, or the more ability we have to navigate through our fears, the easier it is for us to really hear God, right? Because oftentimes, and I know for me earlier on, I used to exist from a place of fear, right? So like even when I thought that I heard a voice of God, it was really like my fear that was speaking, right? So if you're able to navigate through your fears, you can actually exist in a place of love, which allows you to be intentional about hearing God. So I hope that y'all heard that. Okay, so now we're gonna start episode 3, how to hear God's voice. So just a disclaimer, right? Like I am a human. Shocker, I know. Um and of course I have blind spots, right? So just be clear, like I do not think that I know all the answers. I do not think that I hold God's like message, right? Like in full transparency, I do not believe that. But what I am speaking from a place of experience, from a place of research, from a place of knowing. But of course, I do not necessarily know because I am human. So, with that being said, right, the things that I say may or may not apply to you. You may or may not disagree. And whatever it is that you believe is perfectly fine. Like, really, my goal is for me to give you the information and then for you to decide what you believe and what you want to take on, right? And really, the hope is for us to expand our minds throughout this podcast and to just be better human beings because why not? And once again, of course, it is okay to disagree with me, but we don't do disrespect here. No disrespect. Like, I happily block people. I have not blocked anyone yet in full transparency, but I will if you are disrespectful. But once again, you can agree, you can disagree, perfectly fine. So, what is Activate God? Well, Activate God is a growing community with over 25,000 followers across social media platforms. And Activate God, for one, shares daily prayers. And I'm so grateful for the folks who've shared, liked, commented, subscribed, etc. to all the prayers. It's been really near and dear to my heart to like know that like it has been resonating with you all. So thank you once again and continue sharing, liking, do your thing, right? So the other part about Activate God is one of the things that I'm really passionate about is really understanding how God, who God to be, who is God, right? And how people understand God to be. And the truth is, right, and especially in our lifetime, I don't think we're gonna have one central religion. I think, or one religion generally. I think that there's going to be multiple religions. And from my understanding, most people believe that the religion that they choose is the way to hear God and the way to speak to God and the way to honor God, right? But my goal is for me to understand it through different lens. So like through the Christian lens, through the Ifa lens, through the Muslim lens, and for us to really talk about the similarities between the two or the three and other religions, right? Because I find that like religion specifically and spiritual practices are usually a space of divisiveness, which is actually not necessarily healthy, I think, in some spaces. So I do want to come from a place of like similarities and really understanding like religion generally. So my hope and my goal is for me to talk about it, for me to teach it, for me to understand it, for me to learn from y'all too. So please comment, share, etc. Right. So the other part is one of the things that I'm super passionate about is like self-development and life lessons and just learning about life and talking about life, right? And of course, this podcast, the hope is for us to just talk about life, like whatever that looks like, right? So I believe that like God is at the center of it all, but God is connected to our finances, God is connected to our physical health, God is connected to our mental health, God is connected towards our emotional stability, God is connected towards our connections with other people, God is connected towards like really anything and our creativity, our entrepreneurship, right? So we're here to talk about life lessons and just navigating through life. Like that's really it. And my hope is that this podcast ultimately helps you expand and explore your relationship with God, yourself, and others. So that this way we can help each other continue to activate God and center God in our lives. So thank you for that little disclaimer that took a little bit longer than I thought, but it's fine because we're doing this thing. Yeah. So, oh, I haven't introduced myself. Did I? I don't even remember because y'all, it's been a long day, and I tried to set it up in a different way compared to like the last two, and I don't even. It took me way longer than I thought. So, once again, if I have not mentioned my name already, my name is Habibat Tisha too, and I'm the founder of Activate God. So, Activate God Episode 3 podcast. The first thing and the first way to hear God's voice is for one, I believe that you have to recognize the ways in which you have to be grounded and the ability to take care of yourself, right? Because I think in truth, most of us do not necessarily connect like the ability to hear God and godly spaces with our connection towards taking care of ourselves. So in order for you to really hear God's voice, you have to like be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically as grounded as you can be. Because this way you can discern whether or not it's your voice or God's voice or something else that's speaking to you. So first off, just being grounded, just being intentional, just being at peace and really taking care of yourself, right? The other part, the disclaimers right here in regards to like how to hear God's voice is I think it takes good character, right? It takes principle, it takes intentionality, it takes humility, it takes nurturing, it takes wisdom to really hear God's voice because of like how invisible it can be sometimes. And of course, like I think that God speaks to us through people, through like physical things, right? Um but I think it's important to like really exist within good character to really hear and discern what it is, right? The other part about the ability to hear God's voice is to be in constant relationship with God. And that looks like establishing it, that looks like maintaining it, that looks like you constantly being in relationship because it's just important. The same way that you take care of yourself daily and during the moments where you do not, you feel it, right? And I know I do. When I am not taking care of myself, I literally feel it in every way. But the same way for God, right? I think the more consistent you are in worshiping, in prayer, in communing with God, the easier it is for you to really understand God and for you to be at peace. So, I don't believe that God speaks to us in one way. I think that God speaks to us in many different ways. And of course, because we are individualized and how unique we are as humans, the more it is interesting to know that like the way God speaks to us is really a personal experience. Like it's different from person to person, right? And then the other thing is The pursuit of God and hearing God does not necessarily take an individual journey, right? It's not just you by yourself. It can and oftentimes should include other people, your elders, your mentors, your siblings, and other loved ones to allow you to really be a lot more intentional about like really hearing God. And once again, I think that God speaks to us through different people, through different ways. So the closer you are, the more intentional you are around establishing relationships with people, the easier it is for you to discern and hear God. So I also believe that like in order for you to hear God, you have to be patient, right? I think that for some people, it's like, hey, I prayed about this thing and I want God to tell me what to do. But sometimes that's not how God works. Unfortunately, I know I'm like, I want God to answer my prayer right now. And I want to like hear what the message is. And I want you to make it clear, right? But sometimes it just takes time to reveal what God wants us to do, right? And then the other thing is you have to have faith in God. Like, and I know for me, like trusting God sometimes is a struggle, to be quite honest. Because sometimes like my experiences makes me question, like, is God is God really with me during this moment because of the things that I'm going through? And this is the things that I'm going through is crazy right now, right? But the truth is, I think that like you have to have faith in God. And you have to be open towards hearing God. You have to be open, right? And I also think like the ability to remove your ego and remove yourself out of it is important. I know for me, God's voice is a lot more loving than my own, right? God's voice and God's like speaking to me, it's usually like a soft whisper, not necessarily a loud, aggressive thing that I need to do immediately, right? And I think, of course, I do think that after a while, the whispers become louder and louder because there's moments where I do not listen. And y'all, I'm human, and you don't either, so it's cool, right? But I think it's important to like be intentional about like removing yourself from the situation so that you can really hear God clearly. So now we're gonna talk about like the different ways to hear God, and the different way God speaks to us, right? So the first way is um is through silence. I think sometimes, particularly here in the world, we live in a world where there's constant noise, constant movement, constant like we gotta do, right? And it's sometimes in order for you to hear God's voice, you have to like you have to remain silent. You have to calm the noises, calm whatever's happening in your mind, calm it down, remove yourself from like the situations and just remain in silent. The other thing is meditation, right? And of course, this includes guided meditations too. But I think it's important to like really get yourself and like re-ground yourself. And I think for some people, particularly like folks who are either Muslim or even Christian, sometimes like meditation not a thing that like we talk about as much. But I think meditation is a form of prayer in a sense of like you recentering yourself, you finding peace with yourself, and then finding a space where you can connect to your higher self and getting in space where you can connect with God as well, right? So another way to hear God's voice and how God speaks to us is really through feelings and intuition. Like sometimes just the knowing. You just know something. And of course this one is a little bit like more unique because it's like how do I really know that God believes this thing? And I think that's where the individual walk comes in. And then that's also where the mentorship, the eldership comes in so that you can actually understand if it's your intuition or is it your fear or is it like your gut? Like, so I think it's important to like like walk through that with someone so that you can discern what it is. But the other thing is I think sometimes time reveals those things to you and then understanding your patterns and understanding like yeah, understanding your pattern would allow you to see, like, is this God speaking to me historically? Is this how God have spoken to me through my feelings, or is it usually the opposite? So I think really journaling and trying to reflect on what has happened in the past and then taking note of like the current moment. The other way to hear God's voice or for God to speak to us is through dreams and through signs. There's different signs. Sometimes like when I'm walking and I'm like, "Hey God, like I need you to like blow the wind a little bit harder to know that this is really you." And then sometimes it happens, sometimes it don't. And that does not mean that it's not really God, right? But there's different signs that you get. There's different like messages that you get that will allow you to understand God. And I think specifically for folks who are dreamers, and there's moments where I have dreams and I think the dream specifically, I believe, and once again, y'all, I am human and I don't necessarily know everything. I do want to say that. And once again, I can also be wrong, like, and that's fine. But I believe that like dreams sometimes show us, it depends on the person, right? But dreams sometimes show us what will happen, what could happen, and what we need to see so that it can alter our realities, right? Because I don't believe that like all dreams are like this will be the thing that happens. I do believe that like sometimes God like gives us a dream so that we can see the possibilities, so that we can move a particular type of way, so that we could be intentional in a way, so that we can help someone else. And so I do believe that. And some for some people, like their dreams may not necessarily be like, I dreamt about this and this is the thing, right? But it could be a lot more like nuanced, right? I know some people, I know in the past had dreams about like animals and I've seen like numbers, like those types of things, like a lot more nuanced. And I think it's important to like be intentional about doing your research and being intentional about like really tapping into yourself and other people to understand what others have experienced. The other thing, the other way to hear God's voice and to understand that God is speaking to you is just do audible, right? I think literally like there's moments, and I feel like I'm becoming this is yeah. I think there's moments where you literally can hear God speaking, and it's like a oh, this is what you should do. For some people, not all. Once again, this is a unique journey, and it depends. But for some people, it is through like an audible like this is what you should do or this is what I believe, right? The other way to hear God's voice for some people is through music. Like you a song is speaking to your heart and you hear it and it's there's particular phrasing and words that's being said and it's like validating what you believe or what you need to like push through on. Music is a way of hearing God's voice. The other thing is through different rituals, through different like practices. I think that is another way to hear God's voice. Another way is through books, like sacred texts. And I'm talking about like self-help books as well as like sacred texts like the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, the Tripitaka, which is something I recently learned about. I knew that like Buddhist have like a sacred text and it's called the Tripitaka. And there's different like ways to pronounce it, by the way. So I'm also learning and researching, so it's just interesting, and I love this for me. But definitely self-help books can also be a way that God speaks to us, right? The other thing is through prayer, do a simple prayer. And I think like you can pray that like, hey God, like I need you to speak to me in a way that I can understand and make it clear so that I know if it's you or me. Or God, show me the way. And I know for so I'm Muslim for folks who don't know. And I'm really like spiritually fluid in the sense of like I love learning and understanding how people see God and I really like learning about like different religions. And I go to different religious spaces, right? But specifically I know for Muslim people there's a particular prayer that we do that like allows you to to ask for the things that you want and for God to like speak to you a little bit more clearly. And I feel like in Christianity too, there's like there's things that you can do to like hear God a little bit more intentionally. So the other thing, and I mentioned this before in regards to like ways to hear God's voice, is through other people. I think God speaks to us in different people, through different people, because we are not necessarily isolated in our own world. We are connected with each other in more ways than we can even fathom and understand. But I think God speaks to us through people. I know for me, like there's moments in my life where I'm like, hey God, I need you to give me a sign. Like I need something here. And I would literally get a call from like one of my loved ones and they're like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? I think you should do this. And it's like, wow, like thank you so much, God, for speaking to me from them or through them. And then lastly, and of course, this list is not necessarily exhaustive, right? Like there's a different plethora of ways to hear God. But I think the other thing is like God sometimes speaks to us through repetition, through repeated confirmation, through different ways. So it's like you get a prayer here, you get a sign here, you get a dream here, you get someone to validate the thing here. Like and then things literally feel like it's in alignment, right? So I think those are the ways in which I think God speaks to us. I do want to say that like sometimes our issues is sometimes not our ability. Our issues is sometimes isn't our ability to hear God. It's in our ability to trust God and to move in the things that we were told to do. There's many moments where I believe that God was like, "Hey, you should do this." And I'm like, "No, that's not God. That must be me. I don't know." And I get like the different messages and through different ways. And it's like, no, I don't want to. This doesn't feel comfortable. And this is like my way of like really rejecting the trust of God, or me saying that I don't really trust God, but it's also me moving in fear. And I think it's intentional as you are trying to hear God for you to move through the fears and to really trust God and to move in things that you were told and offered. And the other thing is, as you become more and more clear as how God speaks to you, it is important to be obedient with it, right? Like literally like being able to listen and move, right? And as I've struggled in the past to discern if something is my voice versus God's voice, is that like I spoken to like my trusted ones and my loved ones and reflected on like my past patterns of God, or like really my perception of God, to figure out like if it's me or is it God. And I think, of course, like things get revealed with time. So we may not necessarily know 100% like if it's this thing, right? But I think it's important to like really reflect on what has happened in the past, but also like get like your loved ones to mentor you and to guide you and to bounce ideas off of. Because yeah, you don't have to necessarily do it by yourself. I also want to say that like really reflecting on our lives and seeing the places where God have spoken to us and God have said something to us, and we decided not to do it, or we decided to do it, can sometimes show us like lessons, right? And it can sometimes show us like the ways in which God speaks to us. Okay, so in all, I think that in order for you to hear God's voice, you have to keep working on it. Like it's a continuous practice, right? The same way that like if we're trying to like build a muscle, if we go to the gym one day and we lift like 5 pounds, we're not gonna see much results, right? But if we go to the gym 5 days a week, which I don't do, and I want to do, but I don't right now. If we go to the gym 5 days a week, right, and then we continue to increase the dumbbells that we carry, then as time progresses, it becomes easier to hear God's voice. Or in this scenario with like the dumbbells, it's easier for you to pull the dumbbells. I don't even know if this is a okay, y'all get the point. So in all, I do want to say that like I pray that you are able to hear God's voice more and more clearly. I pray that you're able to live less fearfully. I don't question if you'll ever not have fear. I think fear is a part of the humanistic experience. I do think that like the ability to navigate through it is also part of the humanistic experience that we can choose, right? And I feel like there's a moment during this episode where I paused because I was like, "Ooh, I feel like I'm sharing too much," right? And my biggest prayer right now for y'all, from me to y'all, is that you don't judge me, especially publicly online. Folks are mean. Like the people on the internet are bullies, and the people on the internet are hilarious. And I don't want any bullying in my life, and I don't want y'all to judge me based on my own experiences. So please don't. But hey, y'all, I'm at the point in my life where I'm just trying to surrender towards the things that I know I need to do, which is for me to just start showing up more authentically. And whether or not I get judged, that's just a part of the experience. And I have to have like a strong backbone anyway for the things that I want to do. And yeah, just continue showing up. So I hope that this was a good episode for you all. I hope that you learned something. You can definitely comment what is it that you believe, ways in which God has spoken to you, what messages you've gotten, your past, your present, even the signs and the visions that you may have gotten for the future. So I pray that this is a safe space, and you can definitely comment below whatever it is that you believe or what's on your heart. So thank you once again for joining me. My name is Habibat, and thank you. We are going to activate God together. Thanks. This was a pleasure. Mwah. um, episode 3, activate God. So last episode I created a song and I'm just gonna sing it because why not? Episode 2, activate God. Episode 3, activate God. Episode 3, activate God. Episode 3, activating God. Episode 3, activate God. Y'all, I can actually sing in my mind. I think I can actually sing in my mind. But yeah, I hope that y'all really learned something from this episode. And yeah, let's continue to activate God together and come back for episode 4, where we will be talking about something else that I don't know yet because it has not hit me yet. So enjoy. I hope that you have a lovely day, a lovely week, and a lovely year. And in the midst of life's happenings, I pray that you find joy, you find lightness, you find peace, you find serenity, you find um calmness, you find love, you find like really all the abundant things that you deserve to find. So once again, enjoy. Habibat here. Peace out.